The origin of language will be the topic of discussion. This discussion has been divided into several parts. Viewers who are interested to know about the origin of language can view the video. All the contents are collected through extensive search in the internet and has been compiled as best fit to our ability and comprehension. If there is any misrepresentation of any fact, we request for the viewer's discretion. Language is a miracle. However, have we thought about the origin of language, or where did language come from, or who pioneered language? Is the source of all languages is rooted back to the one single language? Let us explore. Hypothesis 1. The origin of language can be a single proto-language that slowly evolved and was transported to different parts of the world. The similar words found in languages that look completely different can be supporting evidence. Regardless of the soundness of this theory, can words evolve drastically enough to look absolutely different from their origin? If there is one word that sounds the same in distinct languages, will it show that these languages came from the same origin? For example, the word tick can be the origin of words that look very different today. A subclasses of linguists who study a group of Native American languages works on this issue. They have reconstructed many words to their protoform. By the way, protoform means a hypothetical form of a word reconstructed from derived words. These linguists are called algonquinists, and they try to find the origin of language. From the same origin, if we look at the word tick and try to see how it looks different today in many different languages, will give us an understanding of the hypothesis 1. The evolution of tick. Algonquinists reconstructed the words one and finger and concluded that they come from the root word tick. The supporting idea is that people count one with the finger. The other supporting idea is that some languages still use similar words. For example, in Dinka, a Sudanese language, the word for one is talk. In Turkish, the word for only, that is kind of like one, is tek. In Old English, tahe was the word for toe, which is similar to a finger. In Japanese, te is hand, which is also related to fingering. In an Eskimo language, the word for index finger, the word is stick. Examples are numerous, and they all pose one question: do they all come from the same origin? Do Japanese and English have the same origin? Let's see some other example. If the proto-language argument is applicable, then Japanese and English must have the same linguistic origin. There are supporting examples like more in English, that means more in Japanese. Another is so in English means so in Japanese. And the word not in English is almost same in Japanese, name, and such more. The same we can see or can apply to many pairs of languages. Another such example we can find in Thai languages, where the Thai word fi means fire, Thai in Thai means tire, and rihin in Thai means rain, which is quite similar to English languages. The carved writings prove that many languages came from the same source. Statistically speaking, it is normal to have such accidents among the 6,000 languages of the world currently we know. But they also show different origins for separate groups of languages. Some words are still very similar in languages that might not even come from the same proto-language. Does this mean there is no systematic resemblance between distinct languages? The global limits. There are limits that no languages breaks. No language has 16 consonants at a time or 7 vowels just running after each other. Another global limit is the use of clicks in languages, even though they can add more variety to the sounds of the language. This is another argument that supporters of the pro-world theory used to prove the single origin of all languages. The language dates back to roughly 150,000 years ago. However, all the linguistic evidence, which are mainly in writing, dates back to around 6,000 years ago. Consequently, the major history of language is discovered through guesses and where written evidence that is much newer. The problem is that the similarities, as we discussed, like the word tick, considering the global linguistic limits and the arguments, are not enough to testify the existence of the same pattern among all languages. Without enough evidence or a universal pattern, it is not possible to prove without reasonable doubt that the origin of languages coming from the same root, and it gets even more difficult. Common questions about origin of language. Where did language come from? Language started around 150,000 years ago to meet humans' communicational needs. The origin of language is under debate, as evidence of language before writing is almost impossible to find. What is the origin of all languages? One theory argues that the origin of all languages was the same, but they slowly evolved and made thoroughly different entities, just like the animal did. However, considering the same root for all languages requires more evidence. What was the first language on earth? The first language on earth might be the origin of all languages, or a dead language that fathered only a few of today's languages. Since language is 150,000 years old and writing is only 6,000, no written evidence of languages before can answer this question. How did language started? The origin of language was perhaps the need to communicate. Maybe the initial words were only house and goods, but eventually they evolved to form a systematic way of communication for humans. The four questions we have just mentioned will be elaborated and discussed in details along with the different theories and hypotheses. Try to explain the origin of language for the last 200 years, where we will try to see how the origin of language has been addressed in context of different dogma along with the answers and above all the related reasonable justification. Thank you for spending your precious time in watching this, and here we conclude the part 1 about the origin of language.